UFC 263 coming up this Saturday from the Gila River Arena in Glendale, Arizona. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. Always with me to my left, to your right, at Matt Allen FNP over on the respective socials. Not his name, it's Matt. Everybody asks, are we brothers? That's right. Now, Matt, we have quite a few rematches on this card. Eryk Anders, Darren Stewart. In the co-main event, you have Deiveson Figueiredo, Brandon Moreno. In the main event, Marvin Vettori, Israel Adesanya. For Marvin Vettori, came into the UFC back in 2016. For Adesanya, back in 2018. You know the rest of the story for Adesanya. Tasted defeat in his last fight. Up trying to become a two-division champ against Jan Blachowicz. And it's weird to me because the conversation was, it was always the move to 205. I always wanted to become champ. Maybe I move up to 265. I fight John Jones. And now the conversation's a little bit more subdued. You know, was there a little bit of pressure to go to 205? Never really wanted to go to 205. It's interesting to hear the rumblings around this fight. For Marvin Vettori, well, the guy's cried foul since he lost the first fight, which also happened to be at the Gila River Arena a few years ago. The main event of that card, Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. Great fight. But when it comes into this one, I had the chance to listen to the Submission Radio interview from earlier on in the week with City Kickboxing's own Eugene Behrman. A lot of interesting tidbits about this fight, but it's really disappointing and really unfortunate, I should say. The unfortunate passing of a teammate in Frevola who was unfortunately murdered not that long ago. And he said it's really been tough for some of the fighters to process it and to try and grieve ahead of this fight. Guys taking a couple days, maybe a week out of the training to get ready. So we just want to send our condolences to the family and the friends of the fallen fighter there. It was definitely unfortunate news the last couple of weeks. And I hate to start being a Debbie Downer that way, but we do have two City Kickboxing fighters on this card, Brad Riddell, Israel Adesanya. For Adesanya, again, it's unfortunate the last time he went out, and I really don't like it when fighters kind of talk about it. Well, you know, I was taken down, and it was a lot of hugging. It wasn't a lot of advancing position. It wasn't a lot of offense. It was just stalling. And he talked about that in the Blachowicz fight, and he talked about that, if you watch the countdown, rewatching the third round against Vettori. And while it may have been a lot of positionally safe maneuvers by Blachowicz and Vettori, it's just a little disappointing to hear that. You know, you can sit there from your seat and say, come on, you got to do something against it. But ultimately, he beats Vettori, he loses to Blachowicz, and now we're here at 185 pounds.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I think you do have... I think you're right when you're talking about the Blachowicz fight. I do think Blachowicz did enough on top where, listen, there's no way he was going to get stood up. But in the Vettori fight, Vettori did just kind of lay on him. Yep. Vettori didn't do a whole lot offensively. And the fact that Adesanya was able to get back up to his feet is really... That's the big thing. At the end of round 4 and at the end of round 5 against Blachowicz, Adesanya wasn't the one who was like, okay, I'm going to now get my underhook, get back up to the feet. The round ended, and that's how he got back up to his feet. At least in the Marvin fight, he was at his feet before the end of the round. And that is really important because Israel Adesanya, I think, could get taken down by Marvin Vettori and get back up to his feet. I don't think he had that luxury against Jan Blachowicz because, Jan Blachowicz is that guy. I think we got to start showing him a little bit of respect. But also, Jan Blachowicz is a legit black belt. You don't go from submitting Nikita Krylov to then not being able to control Israel Adesanya on the ground. So I do think Adesanya has a little bit of a claim that Vettori was using a little bit of stalling, but I do agree with you. It is a little bit disappointing hearing him use those terms, but I'm going to flip it over to Marvin Vettori. I hate that he thinks he won that first fight. I don't like that whatsoever. Listen, Brandon Moreno going into his next fight against Deiveson Figueiredo doesn't say, hey, I thought I beat him. I definitely beat him. I'm crying foul constantly. He was like, listen, it was a really close fight. Could have gone either way, but I'm going to get him next time. I love that mindset because Brandon Moreno's like, listen, I was that close to being able to beat him. If I work a little bit harder every single day and put in that little bit extra time, then maybe I can get to that level. Marvin Vettori's like, okay, I already fought him to a split decision. Yeah, he's got better, but I know I've gotten a lot better. And I'm not going to accuse Marvin Vettori of not being a hard worker, because if he is anything, he is a hard worker. You see this man in the gym. And this is the cool thing about Marvin Vettori, too. People like to get really excited when they see, Conor McGregor put out training footage, or just these different fighters. I don't care which countdown show it is. When they're at King's MMA, Marvin Vettori is included in that shot. Because Marvin Vettori is in shape year-round, and that's really important. He's not a guy who treats fighting like it is a part-time job. He's someone who, when he's not in camp, he's still trying to get better. And I think that's really important, because when we talked about, I guess even in the last one with Figueiredo, how he is continuing to improve, even though he became champ, That's important. You have to keep on getting better. And again, I'm going to reference Chael Sonnen. He said the reason Randy Couture was able to fight so late into his 40s is because Randy Couture would go to, I forget which university it was, but he would go train with the young guys. He would always make sure there were young guys around because those are the guys who are going to bring new things to your sport. If you're constantly training with people younger than you, then you're going to learn those new wrinkles too. You won't age out like the other legends of your division or your sport. And that's why Randy Couture was able to stay around so long. Marvin Vettori, I think, will have Marvin Vettori should also have an equal level of longevity, especially in this sport, and that's what this fight comes down to for me. I think Marvin Vettori can become UFC champion at some point during his UFC tenure. I just don't know if it's going to be right now, and it's weird because Adesanya's not old by any means, and I don't really look at this division like it's an old division. It's definitely not one of the younger ones in the UFC, but when you look around, Marvin Vettori's 27, and a lot of the guys in the top 15 right now are in that 30 to 35 range, and I do think that it could just be a matter of time until Marvin Vettori kind of ages those other guys out of the division, and sooner rather than later, he could become champ. Now, he's going to have to go through Paulo Costa, Robert Whittaker, Adesanya, like, there's
Jared
some...
Cannonier.
Jared Cannonier's not an easy fight either. Like, there's some really good fighters out there at 185 pounds, and you've got to be phenomenal to get the title. I'm just saying that there is a situation where even if Vettori gets completely outclassed on Saturday, I do think that he can just keep on working, and let's say in another 3 years he gets another title shot. I don't know how much he's been improved in the last 3 years since they fought. Can you imagine if he's been able to improve that same level during the next 3 years? We could be dealing with a completely different fighter.
When you look at Marvin Vettori coming into the UFC, fought for Venator, who hosted such fights as well. They were supposed to have Mayhem Miller, but he weighed in, like a weight class higher. They had who? Paul Harris, who's smart Paul Harris, taking on Emil Weber-Mech at the time. But you do look at it, for Marvin Vettori, kind of had the same game. I mean, southpaw, pumps the jab, works the takedown, really powerful. But he's added wrinkles and he's gotten better. And I mean, to me, what fight do you want to pick off as a real coming out party? I mean, his UFC debut, he beat Alberto Uda. That was a good win. UFC 202, Diaz McGregor 2. That was pretty good. Lost to Shoeface, beat Vitor Miranda, draw against Omari Akhmedov, which is nice to have in 2017, and I think it ages well. Lost to Adesanya by split decision, beats Mutante Cesar Fajea. He beats Andrew Sanchez and beats him quite badly. Finishes Carl Roberson in the weird, we hate each other, we fought in the hotel, don't take my ciabatta. And I'm not saying that as a stereotype. That was an actual thing. That
was the Kevin Holland ciabatta.
Alright, so it was Kevin Holland. I've mixed my references, but he didn't like Carl Roberson, and Carl did something cool. He did a flip off the cage in that fight, but Vettori looked great. Here's the point I want to make with Marvin Vettori. The Marvin that fought in 2020, it's wow, this guy's really on another level. He beat Carl Roberson badly. He beat Jack Hermanson badly. He beat Kevin Holland badly. And I've seen it out there in the comments section this week. I threw it out there in the community tab to get a pulse on what people were thinking on this fight. There's a lot of people on Israel Adesanya's train. And there were a lot of people that said Kevin Holland, when he had the opportunity, way outstruck Marvin Vettori. He did have pockets of success, but the large majority of that fight was big mouth on his back with Vettori on top. Not just stalling position. If it was even from a guard, he was really landing down a lot of blows. And Kevin Holland's one of those guys that once he gets on bottom, he accepts the guard, he locks his feet, and he just tries to hold on for a stand-up. He has a hard time getting to his feet. And listen, give him credit. He's at AKA right now, training with Darren Win. Hopefully his wrestling defense gets better. But in that fight, it was all Vettori. And I know it was short notice. It was supposed to be Vettori Till, but still, Vettori looked great, tuning him up, getting ready for this fight. It makes things even more interesting.
It does. Now, I will give Kevin Holland a little bit of credit for that performance, because there was one point in the 5th round where he hit Marvin Vettori with a few clean shots in a row. It's not like Vettori was, rocked to the point where he couldn't continue, but he definitely got stunned from them. And if Kevin Holland can stun you in the 5th round, then I do worry about what Israel Adesanya is going to be able to do to you in the 5th round, because this is the problem I have with Marvin Vettori. I like a lot about his game. I really do. I can't say enough good things about Marvin Vettori. He is hittable, though. And that worries me. Robert Whittaker, I think, is actually a worse matchup for Marvin Vettori than Adesanya is, just because Whittaker, his whole game is, I'm going to defend all of your takedowns and try to knock you out, whereas Adesanya has to work a little bit more to defend the takedowns. I do think Adesanya's takedown defense, though, is good enough to beat Marvin Vettori, and that's what I keep on coming back to. Can Marvin Vettori damage Israel Adesanya enough in the bottom position to where Adesanya's a diminished version of himself? Maybe, but this is the thing about Adesanya. Maybe his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu is the weakest part of his game. He's still pretty good defensively, to where it's not like guys get a lot of ground and pound off on him.
The strange thing about Israel Adesanya, you might look at the run and you discount things and whatever. Let's look at it. Brad Tavares, what's he good at? He can power punch, but he can wrestle. Derek Brunson, hell of a wrestler. Kelvin Gastelum, great wrestler. Robert Whittaker, good MMA wrestler. Yoel Romero, one of the best to ever wrestle. Win. Like, he beat all those fighters. However, it was a lot of those fights were contested in striking range and with a lot of strikes. Like, you saw Brad Tavares strike with him. You saw him finish Derek Brunson early, and it was pretty much a striking contest. Kelvin Gastelum struck. Robert Whittaker struck. Yoel Romero struck. And it's really weird when you look at all those, and he beats a lot of good wrestlers, and you focus on Vettori, who's very well-rounded. Is he at the same level as some of these other fighters? I think we have to give him his flowers because he's proven in his last, if not 3 fights, that he definitely is on that level. It's just a really tricky fight.
I have a question for you, and I just thought of it right now, but it's an honest one. Right now, today, is Marvin Vettori better than Derek Brunson, and has he proved it?
I think he is. I really do think he is.
Personally, because right now the way I look at this fight is, well, Derek Brunson does a lot of the things Marvin Vettori does. I think Derek Brunson has more power than Marvin Vettori, on the feet at least. I think Marvin Vettori is the better wrestler, at least has the better cardio with his grappling than Derek Brunson. But those fighters to me are kind of similar. I think Vettori's much more durable than Brunson, but just X's and O's wise, you can get a good read off each other's game. The thing that worries me going into this fight, though, for Vettori is that hitability factor. If he does go in there lunging for takedowns, because he does believe he can take down Adesanya easily, then I do think he's going to get caught sooner rather than later. Look at the Brunson fight. Derek Brunson, who is a very, very good wrestler, just look at his fight against Kevin Holland. He did the exact same thing to him as Marvin Vettori did. But Kevin Holland against Adesanya tried for takedowns. He really did. He just couldn't get them. Like, to the point where he was basically ripping off Adesanya's shorts. He was trying so hard to get the grip onto him. Adesanya, once he did realize the entries of Derek Brunson's takedowns, immediately hit him with a knee, and you could tell it was the beginning of the end from there. The second he rocked Derek Brunson, he basically put him away with like a 70-punch combo. It was very nice to watch. I think Marvin Vettori has the durability to where he won't get finished if he does get hit by one of those strikes, but I do think that after every one of those knees, they're going to add up. And if every time you're going for a takedown, you're being met by a big strike, I just think that by the 3rd round, you're not going to be going for as many takedowns. And I do think Marvin Vettori has made improvements in his striking, but I don't think Marvin Vettori's at the level now to where, oh, I'm comfortable with him being in there striking with Israel Adesanya. Because Robert Whittaker is about as good as an MMA striker can get, and I mean, like, as good as a striker can get, pretty much, and Adesanya was able to knock him out.
Here's the X factor for me. So let's talk about the odds quick. Adesanya opened at minus 235. He's a minus 259 right now. Vettori opened a plus 200. He's a plus 207. And if we have a look at the Tapology votes, surprise to me, it's surprise to you, it's surprise to you out there. They've obviously changed since, but 1,083 total votes, 80% Adesanya, 59% by knockout, 20% that have Vettori, 65% by decision. What does Marvin Vettori do well, and what has he accentuated? He's a good grappler. He's a good wrestler, and once he gets top position, it's hard to get him off of you unless the ref stands you up. It's really, really tough to get him off of you. I think he's improved enough to strike to clinch to takedown, and the one thing that he's a little bit too comfortable about is when he gets into the clinch, he'll hold position until he can get that right spot to work the takedown, but he can tire you out, and Adesanya has good cardio, and Marvin Vettori has good cardio. Vettori started to win out in the 3rd round of their first fight, but now we're going back 3 years, so you have to give it a little bit of a grain of salt. But again, you said Adesanya started to get up. In the Blachowicz fight, though, 4th round, 5th round, it really started to go out the window. Whoever wins the first 2 rounds of this fight is probably going to win this fight. And I know that sounds really simple, because there's 5, and you got to win 3. But I like Vettori's chances in this fight for that fact, and if he gets us to the mat, it's going to be really tricky. Have we seen it? Adesanya knows, hey, I got to pop my right hip if he goes in for the left. He's tried to shore up those deficiencies that he had in the first fight, even just in the 3rd round. But both guys have gotten a lot better. And so I do really appreciate the craft of Adesanya. But if it's me, and I'm sitting on the fence on a fight where I've got an underdog that's more than a 2-1, I go with the underdog in Vettori.
I think there might be some recency bias in that because of Israel Adesanya's last performance against Jan Blachowicz. Like, Jan Blachowicz is better than Marvin Vettori. He's a way better striker. He's far more technical, has much more power, and I think he's a better grappler, too. The fact that Adesanya lost to a bigger fighter who is world-class doesn't change my opinion of Adesanya at all. I still think he's a much better striker than Vettori. I think his cardio is going to be able to hold up, and that's the one thing about Vettori. He does have good cardio, but there's no point in a Marvin Vettori fight where his cardio is so good that you're like, what? I shouldn't say that. There's no point in his fights where his output is so high, I should say, that I'm like, wow, I'm that impressed with his cardio. Like, he's a really good, consistent fighter is what I'm really trying to say. He's not a guy like Max Holloway who's going to pick one round, like, okay, the 4th round is going to be hell, and then I'll kind of pace myself throughout the rest of this. For that reason, I think Marvin Vettori can stay competitive through some of these rounds, but I do think that Adesanya's going to have one big action every round until he does eventually finish Vettori. But I do think that this is going to be a very, very fun fight, and I don't like people saying that Vettori's only getting this fight because they had a first fight that was close. Marvin Vettori's on a legit 5-fight winning streak where not only has he shown the ability to strike with guys, to grapple with guys, to have really good cardio for 5 rounds. Like, Marvin Vettori has proven everything that he has to do to deserve this title shot. I just don't believe it's going to be enough to beat Adesanya.
Big time fight coming up this weekend. Can't wait for it. You've got Adesanya. I've got Marvin Vettori. If any of the picks change on this card, Matt, we have Fight Night Picks kicks on Saturday, 2 hours before the prelims. We lock, we load, and then you find out everything in the community tab after the fact. But hey, big weekend last weekend, 9-3, 7-5. It's unfortunate we had the no contest with Jones and Tom Breeze obviously out of his fight, but we got a great card coming up this weekend. 14 fights there, and apart from kicks, we're going to have some neat content coming out later on in the week. I get this pack, or this box, I should say, a Panini Prism UFC cards. Now, hey, I'm not a rich man. People got to hit up the super chat if I'm ever going to become one, but we did grab these. We're going to do a content piece with those. I've got a top signature series as well, so we'll see what happens there. But all sorts of great stuff with Fight Night Picks. We get you covered for the fights coming up from Glendale, UFC 263. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.